Research is fundamentally about our way of understanding the world. The more we understand it, the more we use it, and the better our world will be.
Imagine a place where curiosity fuels discovery and innovation moves new lives. This is Kennesaw State University, where we don't just dream about a better world, we make it happen. Here, brilliant minds from different fields come together, not just to ask what if, but how and when. From harnessing sustainable energy that lights up our homes to pioneering healthcare technologies that save all our lives. Our collaborative research breaks through university walls, spilling into all our lives and sparking change to a brighter future. But it's not just about groundbreaking projects, it's about the mindsets that conceive them and the hands that build them. At KSU, we empower students to be more than learners, who think critically and lead boldly, ready to take on real-world challenges. Our commitment runs deep. Every research initiative, Kennesaw State lays another brick in the foundation of community prosperity, driving economic growth, and lifting the quality of life for all. Much more than state-of-the-art labs and shiny new equipment, KSU research creates spaces where people can collide with ideas freely and fearlessly. Join us at Kennesaw State University Research as we soar beyond the ordinary. Here, your contributions matter, and your research can truly reshape the world. What does research mean to you? Kennesaw State University, futures aren't just dreamt, they are made.
Welcome. My name is Karen Scapinato. I'm the Vice President for Research at Kennesaw State University, and together with my team, I welcome you to PechaKucha 2024. Before we get started, I'd like for you to help me thank my entire team who worked tirelessly in putting this on. So can we please give them a round of applause? Thank you. We hope we put together a very exciting program for you, and we have all our researchers sitting here who are eager to tell you about their research in a minute. Before we get started, let me tell you what PechaKucha actually is. So PechaKucha is a very special way of communicating science and research. Our presenters are asked to present their research in 20 slides. Each slide is going to be on the screen for 20 seconds. They are not allowed to have words on the slides, and the slides forward automatically. And if you've ever given a scientific presentation, that is not at all how we're used to present. So this is a challenge for all of us. But I hope you will enjoy this. We also added a few extra pieces of hopefully of interest to you. You already will have seen our demonstrations up front there. I invite you during intermission and after our oral presentations to look at our demonstrations that our researchers and our students put together for you. You will also have an opportunity at the end of the presentations to vote. You're going to vote for your best oral presentation and for your best demonstration up front. And then I hope you're going to stay around for some networking. All right, before we get started, I'm going to kick us off with an overview of research at KSU and invite you to imagine research. Most of us have been the subject of phishing emails or some other cyber attack, and imagine what it would look like to be actually cyber safe. Our researchers are working on new encryption methodologies, better communication, better and secure communication ways, and methods to identify cyber attacks. AI is one of these buzzwords everywhere these days, but how do we employ AI? So AI is a helper to us and doesn't take over, and do that in an ethical way. We have a number of projects on AI, anything from our dance department teaching AI how to move like a human, which has implications for physical therapy, but also recreational dance, and you actually see a demo up front there, to simulating environments where we can train our staff and our workforce in environments that are really hard to train for, like natural disasters or medical emergencies. What about if our vehicles could talk with each other to prevent car accidents and make our roads much safer? And then, of course, we have any number of other AI helpers that we can imagine in our industries. Most of us know somebody who suffers from diabetes, and if you know the individual, you know that they have to check their blood glucose level constantly, which currently involves either pricking your finger or wearing one of these continuous glucose monitors, both of which are invasive. You have to draw blood, they have a risk of infection, and of course very uncomfortable and have tremendous impact on the quality of life. What if I told you that our researchers are developing devices for non-invasive blood glucose monitoring with a ring? You just put a ring on your finger, it uses visible light, is perfectly safe, and we can measure your blood glucose levels. Not only that, this ring coordinates with an app on your phone, and the app can determine from what you ate and predict what your changes in blood glucose will be. What if I further told you that our exercise science department is developing very tailored and personalized programs for you in just 10 minutes a day? You can prevent diseases like diabetes to happen. Do you know that 1 in 8 people in Georgia and 1 in 5 children in Georgia suffer from hunger? We are here, our researchers are developing new methods to provide food security by using environmentally controlled new agricultural environments, like this shipping container that you see here that you could put in your grocery store's parking lot and grow produce right in front of you, right within your community. We're also working on food forests around urban areas where we're growing fresh produce for those in need. Most of us had, unfortunately, very recently experienced with natural disasters and the effect that has on our community and on our environment. Our College of Engineering and Engineering Technology and our College of Architecture and Construction Management is working diligently to create new materials that are more sustainable and also can withstand such impact that natural disasters have on our built environment. Furthermore, we're working on restoring native plants to our environment because they can restore our natural environment and be more resistant to disasters like hurricanes that we recently had. A lot of that research happens on our field station, and if you have not had an opportunity to see our field station, I invite you to come. It's about 10 minutes from the Kennesaw State Campus. What if we could use our history to learn about the future? Many of our humanities researchers are exploring our history to inform what is happening and predict how we can better manage our future. I invite you to look at the magnitude of books that are coming out of KSU and other forms of communication. And then entertainment, music, dance, art. You know them as means for entertainment. And we're certainly also interested in entertaining you, but you can also use these media to address issues and address challenges in our community. Anything from using art and performance for incarcerated youth and getting them reintegrated into the community. And you actually have an example of that video game that is shown here on the screen up front there that also addresses issues in our community. Let's not forget our students. With all that and all of these research projects involves our students. Both undergraduate and graduate students actively participate in research projects at KSU in order to prepare them for the workforce. They all get real life experiences, so they are ready when they go and get their job after graduation. Now, a lot of the research and knowledge creation is great, but often requires a move into the market, meaning it needs to be commercialized and sold in some form or fashion in the community. Our Hatchbridge Business Incubator provides an opportunity to students, faculty, and the community. So if any of you have an idea, please come to provide tools and resources to move an idea into the market. Now you may ask, where are we going to go from here? We're already pretty busy with the research we're doing, but we're committed to have our research address the biggest challenges and the biggest opportunities that we see in our community. One of the biggest challenges is health in our rural areas. Those areas are often called healthcare deserts because rural communities often do not have access to adequate health care. So we're in the process of creating a Center for Rural Health to address those issues, look at social determinants that are determining why these individuals do not have access to health care and then mitigate that need. One of our biggest opportunities are our digital means that we all have. We all probably have phones and a number of other digital devices. What if we could connect all our digital tools into a fabric of digital devices and have them work together for us? Another opportunity, and I mentioned that earlier, is the simulating environments that we cannot easily train individuals in. This all will be put together in the Center for Cyber-Physical Convergence, or Cyber-Physical Realms, that will be launched very shortly. Now, let's take a look at where we're actually standing in terms of ranking of research. One of the biggest metrics that we are reporting in terms of how we rank among other institutions, other universities, are called research expenditures, which is really the amount of money we're spending in support of research. As you can see here, just in the last 2 years, we more than doubled our research expenditures, leaving us at about $46 million right now. The 46 is still not the final number that we're having for fiscal year 24. Lastly, I invite you to learn more about why KSU is doing research. We recently launched a new podcast called Research Matters. It has 3 episodes out now, so you can scan the QR code and we can certainly get you in touch on how to get this podcast. But the intent here is to communicate to you all why KSU is doing research. So you will find that we are pairing a researcher with one of our community members and talking about how our research impacts our community. Now, I mentioned AI and what AI can do for us. I invite you to test out our prototype AI avatar, and I'm going to have Dylan demo it over here, which can answer your research questions. Dylan?
Yeah, so this was part of a intentional and quite elaborate collaboration with the Realities Lab. Here, my partner in crime on the project, if you could just raise your hand, this is Kevin Markley. He was the lead Unreal developer for the project, and I stood up the AI backend for the project. What we have here is a space, like a virtual immersive space that people can experience, and I'm just going to demonstrate that briefly.
The researchers that you will be seeing today, each college, we have 9 academic colleges, was asked to nominate 1 speaker. And those are the researchers that you will be seeing today. I already mentioned the voting. After every researcher has presented, we will have a QR code up for you where you can vote for your your favorite presentation and your favorite demonstration. All right. We're ready to start the main part of today's presentation and listen to our researchers and their exciting stories. So the first up is Dr. Victoria Lagrange from the Department of English in the Red Oak College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and her title is Play for Change, The Power of Stories in Video Games.
Hi, everyone. Remember those Choose Your Own Adventure book from elementary school, where if you chose to enter the forest, you met a nice fairy, but if you chose to cross the bridge instead, you encountered a mean troll? What if you could decide what happens to your favorite character in a story and make decisions for them? This is exciting, right? Well, it is not a thing of the past. This is the idea behind game narratives, where users' choices shape the story's direction. They transform players from passive observers into active participants in the story. They get to decide what happens next. The story evolves depending on their choices. The video game industry is a powerhouse, generating over $200 billion globally, which is larger than film, television, and music combined. Among Gen Z, 90% of people identify as gamers. Among Generation Alpha, it's 94%. Simply put, just about everyone plays video games. So, with this widespread engagement, why not use games for good? Well, studies have shown a decline in empathy among college students, and we all spend more time than ever on our screens. What if I told you we can leverage game narratives to foster empathy? I have identified 4 major pitfalls in game narratives. The first one is that players usually don't finish or replay games. The second one is that players feel a lack of control over the story. They struggle to immerse themselves in the narrative. And then finally, the narrative lacks diversity. My research uses quantitative and qualitative methods to analyze player engagement. Think of it as decoding what makes this story stick. I identify what makes you want to play, finish, and then replay the games. All games have flowcharts. This is just in their programming. If you render those flowcharts visible to the players, they get to see the impact of their choices on the story. So it encourages exploration and replayability. Imagine the possibilities of navigating so many different paths in a story. Games are a medium in which agency is prevalent. The user decides where to go, can pick up objects, or fill in quests through their avatar. In story-driven game, there's some kind of paradox in that it's one of the most written type of games, but the narrative designer needs to disappear, leaving the player in charge. So in game narratives, choices need to be difficult so that the player is invested in the story. A choice that pits the character's goal against moral creates a kind of difficulty that is hardly comparable to any other type of game obstacle. It gives players a sense of agency. Players need to feel like they are the ones creating the story, even if they're merely following paths created by the game narrative designer. They need to feel like their choices matter. For instance, if I replay a story, I make 2 different choices, and I get the same ending, then I will feel frustration, right? So in my research, I have shown that in game narratives, the more violent the choice people make, the more they will enjoy the story. Is this problematic? Yes, probably, but it is a fact, right? You need interactivity. So to feel control over the story, you need to be able to predict what happens when you make a choice. But the outcome of the choice needs to be different from what you have predicted. You probably wonder why. Well, if I make a choice and I know exactly what is going to happen, then it's not exciting. There's no engagement. But if I make a choice and I am surprised by the outcome, then there is a lot of enjoyment. Finally, stories should have complex characters. but we need to keep in mind the difference between linear fiction and interactive fiction. So in linear fiction, users typically experience balanced empathy for all the characters. But in interactive fiction, when you play as multiple characters, you tend to use one of the other character as a pawn to help your favorite character, leading to biased empathy. Why does that matter for diversity? Well, if I have multiple characters that I play as, and it's not enough to include those diverse characters and stray away from stereotypes, you need to ensure that those characters do not become pawns for the white characters in the story. At KSU's Game Narrative Lab, we use these insights to design games that will foster a positive social impact through storytelling. And we perform research on those games, analyzing the long-term effect those games can have in real life. Together with 23 alumni, graduate and undergraduate students from 3 different colleges, we have created one game, Corporation Incorporated, which is the first game published by the KSU Game Studio. We are currently working on 2 other games, and you can play this game at our interactive display over there. Corporation Incorporated puts players in the shoes of Maria, who's a recently immigrated woman from Honduras. She's newly hired through a revitalization program, and she needs to make decisions, hiring decisions, navigating a skeptical boss, a lousy friend, and discrimination, mostly. So what I want to show through this story is that first, we can use games to foster empathy for characters. And then second, that games have the potential to influence players' long-term attitudes, in this case towards immigrants. I believe video games, which is one of the most important industry in entertainment, holds immense potential for storytelling that fosters empathy, social awareness, and promotes change. Through the power of game narratives, we have the opportunity to create experiences that will not only entertain, but also transform how we understand one another. At KSU, let's shape the stories of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I don't know about you, but I think that warrior looked pretty scary to me. All right, we're switching gears a little bit to Gregory Fallon, who's in the Coles College of Business in the Department of Economics, Finance, and Quantitative Analysis, and his talk is about economics of education science without a lab.
Thank you. So, my name is Greg Phelan. I'm an assistant professor of economics and a senior research fellow with our Education Economics Center in the Coles College of Business. Our mission in the Education Economics Center is to promote and develop sound policy through the use of data and evidence brought to bear on education issues. When I tell people what I do for a living, often they question why an economist like me is studying education. That's a fair sort of question to have. Typically, we think of economists as studying things like international trade and gross domestic product, maybe financial markets and derivatives, or like prices and inflation. Those are important things that many of my colleagues in the economics department study, but when you get to the core of what economics is, it's really about studying incentives and the decisions that people make based off those incentives. It just turns out that money is a really nice, convenient way of measuring those incentives and then quantifying up the decisions that people are making based off of them. So when we sort of shift our sort of framework and think about education policy as a set of incentives for students and families and policymakers, well then the decisions that those students and their families, their educators and other policymakers are making end up inherently being economic in nature, okay? I titled this presentation, Science Without a Lab, and that gets at the second reason why economists like myself are interested in education policy. Economists as a whole, as a group, are really interested in causality. But we're not afforded the luxury of laboratories like some of my other colleagues in other colleges are, where we get lots of control to see every impact of a particular treatment. That's okay because economists and social sciences have developed lots of statistical methodologies that account for this and still allow us to connect like policy A with effect B in these sort of non-laboratory settings. That's important for me because if I'm studying education and education policy, well, I can't randomly assign a treatment to a student in a classroom the way that a chemist or a biologist would be able to randomly assign an experimental drug to a mouse in a laboratory. So the work that I'm going to talk to you about today is published previously or earlier this year. And what we end up looking at is a policy in Texas that measures school quality or performance. And then we're going to look at how those performance measures impact the principals that lead those schools. Why are we concerned about principals? Well, we think of principals as like a CEO of the school. And if you were to take a company and remove the CEO from that company, you'd expect that the product or the profits of that company to change. So by that same logic, if you remove a principal from a school, then the profits or the product of that school, which is learning, should also change. As I mentioned, we're doing this research in Texas. And so in Texas, the way schools are measured is they're given an accountability rating. And we can think of these accountability ratings as kind of like a report card for the school itself. There's some exemplary schools that get rated as an A school. Average schools get B's and C's. And then there's some unacceptable schools that are failing or get F's. And these ratings, they're based off of standardized tests that all the students in the school have to take every year. And there's kind of two components of this. One is, did enough of your schools, a high enough percentage of the students in your school pass this standardized test every year? And then second, was there enough improvement in this pass rate relative to the prior year? We did a lot of drilling down into the nuts and bolts of this accountability policy in Texas, and it turns out really the thing that matters is, did enough of your students pass every single year, and not so much that growth from year to year. So in a second, a picture's gonna show up, a graph that shows exactly what happens when a school ends up getting past that minimum threshold, okay? What's gonna happen is that their likelihood of escaping that failing rating jumps by 90%, okay? But really what's going on just to either side of this red line is that the difference between these schools is often as random as a handful of students got a better night's sleep the night before the exam, or maybe ate a little bit healthier breakfast the morning of the exam. As it relates to school principals, when they're in a passing school, they're 20% more likely to keep their job. So when you hear this on the surface, it seems like, well, at least in Texas where we're studying this, the system's getting rid of ineffective principals and keeping the good principals around. And if we end up looking at a graph like this that shows the distribution of principal quality based on this pass rate, it certainly looks like these unacceptable principals with the solid line are skewed lower than all the passing principals. But we have to think, is that really how we should measure principal effectiveness? What if we think about achievement gains by students over time? That's really what learning is, right? And if we graph that distribution, well, this tremendous amount of overlap in this graph shows that it's much harder to distinguish these failing principals from their passing counterparts. In fact, many of the failing principals do at least as good a job, if not a better job, in terms of achievement gains than their passing counterparts, yet they're punished by this accountability system and less likely to keep their job. And as we already talked about, that's bound to have some implications for the students they serve. And let's just be honest, the students that they serve are often not the students from affluent suburbs, they're the students from disadvantaged areas. And this policy had an unintended consequence of disadvantaging them even more. Now, I don't want to end on a dour note, so the nice thing about this research is that my co-authors and I were able to team up with some school districts in Texas, and we were able to design some policy that incentivized very effective educators to move into schools with very disadvantaged students. And the results of that work have been, by and large, very positive for everybody involved. So thank you for letting me share my research with you guys today. If you have any questions for me, I don't have a presentation, but just find me in the meet and greet in the networking session. I'm happy to talk to any of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. And we're switching topics again. Dr. Mario Bredfeld from the College of Science and Mathematics, the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Organismal Biology, will be talking about rethinking fertilizers, probiotic solutions for healthier lakes. Mario?
Thanks, Karen. All right, so this is my spawning ground. This is a town called Wilhelmshaven in northern Germany. On the left, you can see the North Sea at low tide. In the middle, a peanut-shaped lake called Lake Bund. And in the distance, lots and lots of agriculture. So when we were kids, we would regularly go swim in this lake. And the good thing about this lake was it's really close to the North Sea. And at low tide, you could jump into the mud. You could cover yourself, pretend to be a mud monster, go back over the seawall, and jump into the lake and have a really good time. I loved it. We all did. Unfortunately, every now and then there was a different monster that prevented us from doing exactly that, which was a green monster. Well, it wasn't really a monster, but it was green algae and cyanobacteria that would regularly cause the lake to be shut down by the authorities, and we couldn't go swimming. That was really sad for us, of course. And back in the day, I didn't really know what was going on, but nowadays, I'm a scientist, and we all know that, of course, like many environmental issues, it's caused by humans. In this case, the overuse or the extensive use of fertilizer. Now, we need to fertilize our fields to get the nutrients, to get the food, of course, but some of that just leaks into lakes and causes those lakes to just grow algae, and in that case, we can't swim in them anymore. So, fast forward about 30 years, more or less, and I'm sitting over breakfast. I'm a scientist now, staring at my yogurt and thinking to myself, this stuff is really good. It's got microbes in it, it's probiotic, it helps me absorb food. It's really good stuff. I wonder if there's such a thing for plants. That's worth researching, I think. Well, lucky for me, the KSU Field Station exists, which is a 25-acre property, more or less, with fields, with greenhouses, with people with expertise in growing crops. So it's a playground for people like me. So what would we do? We reached out and invited 60 people, 60 undergraduate students in various plant classes that I was teaching, and started growing crops, growing tomatoes in this case, because they grow fast, they produce fruit pretty quickly, and they're an important crop in Georgia. And we just got some baseline data, like how to grow them best, what kind of nutrients do they need, and so on. And that really was an exciting time because it got the kids involved and led to lots of interesting results to just get a kind of a baseline. Now then, a little bit later, a colleague reached out, Dr. Satish Gurubatham, and said, hey, let's collaborate. I take photos of produce using thermal imaging, and I can tell you about the shelf life of these. So he joined the project, and now is really hooked. Like, we really got to do more. And I wanted to get a graduate student involved into the project. So we did a little more work on this. We got a little bit of internal funding. And ultimately, we ended up finding a graduate student who took over this work, Colin. Now, Colin really wanted to work with microbes, which was perfect because that was the whole idea. So he developed this foliar spray that he applied to the plants, and it contained a microbe, a bacteria that helped the plants grow. He presented his research at the Georgia Bioinnovation Summit. Very interesting results. It really helped the plants a little bit. But during that time, there was yet another student, then an undergraduate student, who pointed out, you know, one of the problems with a liquid is that it's hard to apply, and just like yogurt, it doesn't have a long shelf life. So there must be a better way of doing this probiotic stuff. So, well, naturally, we went the next step and said, okay, what's out there? What's on the market? And it turns out most probiotics for plants that exist are liquids. And that's okay, they work, but again, they don't have a long shelf life, they're difficult to ship, and they're, you know, you have to reapply them fairly regularly. So this student, who is now a graduate student in my lab and who's here with me, Zach is over there, he's going to do the presentation later on as well, he started developing these prototypes of microbeads. So in this case, we use either chitosan, which is a byproduct of the shellfish industry, so a very sustainable product, or alginate, which again is a product from algae, so easily obtainable. And we encapsulate, we create these little capsules, and we encapsulate beneficial microbes and bacteria. So these capsules then are desiccated, and they're very lightweight, they're easy to apply, so these little granules that you can just put around your plants. That's really nice. So of course there was lots of trial and error, and the first versions came more like snot or boogers. I kept calling them boogers, and luckily Zach wasn't offended by that. But eventually we got these really nice granules, and we started inoculating them with different types of bacteria. And of course the next step is to try, well, does this work? Do we see anything if we apply this to the plant? So we started trials in the lab after we scaled up our production with 3D printing, with involving more students, so we could really, in this apparatus on the right-hand side, you can see this again out on display. So our first trials, we applied the microbeads at the seeding stage, so we had little seeds, put a little bead to it, just giving it that little extra oomph at the beginning. We added the microbeads during the planting stage in some cases, just working it into the soil and working it into the material around the plant. And we collected lots and lots of data. Data on photosynthesis, data of plant stress, like how much stress do they experience, and then most importantly, of course, the yield. And it turns out the produce was a little more sugary, that's good. We had fewer incidences of blossom end rot, which you can see here, and overall the plants were less stressed. So there's a lot more to be done, but the moral of the story is if we can develop an easy-to-apply fertilizer that is not really fertilizer, it's a probiotic, maybe the lake in the future will look more like this because we can reduce the amount of fertilizer used. And kids in the future, next generations, can go swimming whenever they want. And of course, most importantly, they can pretend to be mud monsters whenever they want, jump into the mud, jump back into the lake. So that's what we're working for. I'd love to see you guys over at the booth. Thank you guys for your attention.
Thank you, Mario. Okay, our College of Computing and Software Engineering is represented by two researchers today. Dr. Bobin Deng and Dr. Tae-Young Choi are going to talk about equitable AI for cotton farms.
Cotton is everywhere, from the clothes we wear to the fabric in our homes. You can try your clothes if you don't believe me. Cotton is an important material and has been used in the textile and the fashion in the past centuries. But probably you already know this background. What may be more surprising is that United States actually is the third largest cotton producer in the world, with 5.7 billion of the market value. And our Georgia actually is the second largest cotton producer in this country. Cotton not only the daily income of the farmer, but also the foundation of many industries, like chemical, automatics, food, personal care, and healthcare. The total market value of this industry is more than $17 trillion. And you can see the cotton has huge impact to our daily life, even from many unexpected industries. But actually, this market value can be even larger. Despite we have many pest control techniques, we still lost around 22% of the productions. I will let you to do the math calculation to see how many $1 billion can be added up to our entire market value. Okay, here is the figure of the sting bug. I believe you have spotted them many times. Why they harmless to you, but actually they are the number one enemy of the cotton. According to the data from the USDA, 72% of the insect-related cotton loss are due to the sting bug in Georgia.
Obviously, humans are smarter than sting bugs, so we can work in the field to physically collect these pests. However, we can't work 24 hours, especially through the dark of night when the sting bugs are still active. So, traditionally, instead of relying on manual labor, we've been using lots of pesticides and applying them to entire field. The problem is that the large-scale pesticide applications can damage healthy plants, soils, microbes, and even human health. So now you might wonder what these two computer scientists at KSU can do to solve this problem. In brief, we built a drone and robot pair that can monitor and manage pest control in cotton fields.
During the daytime, the drone will fly over the crop in front of the robot, and the robot will navigate and apply the pesticides in the precise way. And during the nighttime, the robot will use the light chapter to capture the sting bug. AI typically require external computer resource, but we integrate our AI into the drone and make the competition more efficient. Our AI models, combined with the high-resolution camera, able to detect the cotton and sting bug with remarkable accuracy. And our AI model is trained to recognize the health state of the cotton and the activity of the sting bug. We do all the processing in-house. As you can see here, one of our students is assembling the AI drone from scratch. And you can see the AI drone in our demos. By using the information collected by the drones, the robot will navigate in the infected area. The robot is integrated with a more accurate AI model to detect the sting bug and trigger the pesticide spraying unit to approach the sting bug. We will not destroy the remaining area of the crop. During the nighttime, because the sting bug is still very active, the robot will use the light chapter to capture the sting bug. In this way, we can provide around the crop protection for our entire cotton farm.
While we've been speaking specifically about how our drone and robot pair can work in cotton fields, we can actually easily adapt their use for other crops and other bugs. We just need to collect the information about crops' characteristics and bugs' behaviors and train AI models to solve the new tasks. For example, we can adapt the technologies to control snails, slugs, and various worms in strawberry or tomato fields, and even to detect moth in apple or peach orchard. Moreover, our pest control robots are designed to be low cost, $3,000 for each robot. This is key since similar technologies are much more expensive and inaccessible to small or medium-sized farms. This affordable solution that includes inexpensive robots and affordable AI can be reconfigured and retrained to support a variety of other sectors, from education to healthcare. What we propose here represents a paradigm shift for applications of AI solutions. Indeed, in general, AI requires lots of expensive supercomputers and robots. This makes it affordable only to larger companies. In contrast, we are working to create AI solutions for all players, including small and medium-sized enterprises. Such a shift can't be realized without a capable workforce. So here at KSU, we teach the student with the innovative, can-do spirit that you've seen today. Our graduates will be thought leaders for the United States in both academia and industry. If you want to talk a bit more about our affordable and AI solutions and learn how we can help your work and solve your problems, please reach out to us. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will give you an opportunity to fill your glasses and grab some more food. We're going to take a brief intermission for about 15 minutes. So we'll see you back here at 6:15. And please don't forget to be back here. Dr. Geza Kogler from the Wellstar College of Health and Human Services, Department of Exercise Science and Sport Management. And he will be talking about orthoses that move better.
Good evening. This is my family. In the front row, you'll see my mother. She had a fall and had an injury to her spine, and she was rehabilitated with what's called a spinal orthosis. Next to her is my nephew, who's a college athlete and had injured his foot and ankle. He also had an orthosis. Like other families, you probably have someone that has an orthosis or prosthesis. 35 to 40 million people globally require the services of an orthosis or prosthesis for various conditions afflicting the body. So you might likely know someone that has a loss of limb or a device. What's a prosthesis? What's an orthosis? A prosthesis is the replacement of a missing limb. An orthosis is a device that fits over an existing body part. And you can see there's far more orthoses that solve problems, coming from the neck, actually the head, all the way down to the foot. Why do we have so many people? Frankly, we're kind of unhealthy. We have a lot of chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and the aging populations. This is increasing the needs for prosthetic orthotic services and meeting these demands. And we're kind of behind on some of the technology developments. Here's an individual that has difficulty walking. There's a lot of conditions that affect people's walking. Trauma, diseases like stroke, muscular dystrophies, cerebral palsy, all these conditions can really affect people's ability to be mobile. This is one of the main problems that are common to all those. This is called a drop foot. Someone has lost the inability for that front muscle to lift their toe up. This leg now is artificially longer, and it could cause someone to trip, and they can't walk safely. And so the treatment for this is actually quite simple. If we can hold the foot up, clear the ground, now that person can be, their function can be restored. And they can walk relatively normal, often without a link, or without a limp. So, how do we treat this? We can treat this with what's called an ankle-foot orthosis. And its only goal is to hold that foot up. Now, interestingly, that device has been around for 50 years as you see it. The technology is old. It works. Patients walk better. However, this problem is, can we do any better than that after 50 years? The answer is yes, we can. Have we reached the peak? We become so complacent with a device that actually eliminates the appearance of a limp, but is that enough? Well, the problem is that this device only solves the swing phase problem in the gait cycle. That's only 40%. Depending on the stiffness that device provides to the foot and ankle, it can actually impede part of the walking during the stance phase of gait. So, turns out that that's actually pretty important. That the movements of the foot and ankle that they interact with the ground allow us to walk smooth, efficiently. It affects step length, it affects stride length, and it also affects the speed of walking. So if we can solve that part of the puzzle, we can optimize an individual's ability to recover and fully be functional. So here's that AFO again. To allow those movements to occur, the left device has the ability to do that because it's not very stiff, but it has enough to hold the foot up. The device on the right, if it's too stiff, it will block those motions, and they will have a subtle limp that's still present. So we had an idea. If we could just measure how much force it takes to hold that foot up for clearance to achieve that goal, and we could design that joint and add it to this device, then we could actually solve the other problem of stance-face walking and improve and optimize their functionality. So we had to have a team. We have a team of faculty engineers. I'm a bioengineer as well as a clinical orthotist, and I have an electrical engineer and a mechanical engineer. We have prosthetic and orthotic graduate students that are on this project. There's two elements. One is a diagnostic test device, and the other is the ankle-foot orthosis itself. This is a new concept, actually measuring that small amount of force. We've been doing this for hundreds of years, and no one's actually measured the force to solve the problem. So we're going to do that, And we have a computer-controlled device that this little foot plate will lift the foot up, take that measurement, computer-controlled, and we will now be able to have a database of what we need. Now, the beauty of this is that every patient has a different value to hold that foot up. So we can take the measurement to the individual, target what the stiffness should be, and then 3D print a joint like this that can achieve the exact design of that stiffness. And this is what it looks like. Now, the beauty of this, too, is it can change the stiffness in each direction. And it can be 3D printed. Then we have a modular AFO and it controls the foot plate, on the left there. And now, again, it can be targeted for that patient. So we're not leaving it there. We have to have a system. So we've designed a modular device. We have a carbon fiber foot plate, carbon fiber upright, a 3D printed cuff, and then we can select a joint, 3D print it, assemble it, small, medium, and large, left or right foot pieces, so a patient can walk with it out that day. And then if we want to change it, we just pull this out and drop another one in, 3D print it. It's very cost effective. How are we going to evaluate if we're doing this effectively? Outcome measures. I talked about walking speed, step length. So we're going to measure that. We're going to quantify how long it takes for someone to go from their heel to their toe. And I think we will be able to demonstrate that we can improve that. So what's nice is I've given the model for this ankle-foot orthosis, but this same joint can be used on the knee, the elbow, and they can be done very quickly and reasonably cost. So we hope to make people move faster and walk farther. Thank you.
Thank you, Geza. Our next speaker is Paul Lee from the Southern Polytechnic College of Engineering Technology, the Department of Electrical Engineering. And his talk will be on shedding light on the brain of pediatric sickle cell disease.
When was your last time to have severe headache and dizziness? Maybe during the COVID-19? Let's take a couple seconds to think about that moment. Very uncomfortable, painful, you couldn't do anything. Now, how do you feel if that pain is very frequent? Now imagine that frequent pains happens to children under the age of 5. My final request, imagine those children live in an area where all the healthcare resources, infrastructure is underdeveloped. Today, I'm sharing the story about children with sickle cell disease in sub-Saharan Africa. This New York Times headline reveals the heartbreaking reality. This one family lost 3 daughters. In this region, tragically, half of these children do not live past age 5. My talk today is about providing solutions to stop part of this disease, tragedies. The worldwide, 300,000 babies are born with the sickle cell disease. And then 75% of them live in sub-Saharan Africa. And in this region, actually lack of access to the adequate health care and then screening for these children. Actually, sickle cell disease is prevail in the area. The sickle cell disease is originated in the area where malaria is widespread. Having one copy of the sickle gene actually helped the protection against malaria, but having both genes have a big health problems. Actually, sickle cell disease changes the red blood cell and rigid and sickle shape, and then harder and stickier. It's hard to flow smoothly throughout the vessels and inducing lower oxygen delivery to each organ, so causing the widespread of the symptoms. And from infant, sickle patients suffer from repeated episodes of stabbing pain in oxygen-starved tissues. Actually, the symptom depends on where the blood vessels are blocked. And it can affect the multiple organs, spleen, vision, or hurt lung. And one of the devastating outcomes is the brain disease. The risk of stroke for these sickle children is actually 300 times higher than the general population. Can you believe that? So, managing and the screening of this risk is critical for improving their quality of life. And in high-income countries, this advanced neuroimaging modality like a PET and MRI are used to identify the abnormality in the brain. But as you can see, it's huge, prohibitively expensive. Like it requires anesthesia sometimes. So making this technique not suitable for low resource setting use. And the current standard of care is the stroke screening in pediatric sickle cell disease is a transcranial ultrasound. It measures the high blood flow velocity. That's the indicator of the high risk of the stroke as a way to compensate for low oxygen level. So once high blood flow is identified, they need transfusion therapy. But still, the transcranial Doppler is very expensive, and they require the skilled personnel. So the only 8% of the sickle children in sub-Saharan Africa can access the screening protocol. So to address this unmet medical technical needs, we want to propose to develop the light-based sensor. What is a light-based sensor? You already have one. So Apple Watch, do you notice that Apple Watch emitting the green light to measure your heart rate? So it's based on the technology named the photofluorescence. Anyone try to say it? Photofluorescence. So actually, light is a fascinating tool probing biological tissue. While it propagates inside the tissue, it can collect the information about the movement of the red blood cell and also the oxygen binding status. By analyzing detected light, we can quantify brain blood flow and the oxygen level, which are biomarkers for brain health. Actually, using specialized light called the near-infrared light, it can actually penetrate skulls to reaching the brain tissue, and then we can, like this unique capability allow us to measure cerebral hemodynamics without any invasive procedure. So during my postdoc training, working with the clinicians at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, I applied the optical techniques to measure the sickle children's elevated blood flow and their reduced oxygen level, which is indicate for high risk of stroke. So this pilot study on nearly 50 patients demonstrate the technical feasibility of portable novel system. Since I joined KSU 2021, my lab is really dedicated to the developing low-cost, affordable, and novel light-based sensor, wearable sensor to stroke risk screening in pediatric sickle cell disease in low resource setting. So actually, not only about the technology, we formed the multidisciplinary teams, including the expert in the global health and mobile health, even documentary filmmaker. So this multidisciplinary approach is really crucial for addressing this type of medical, technical, social challenges to implementing this technology globally. So our team is planning on the pilot study on Uganda. Actually, Uganda is one of the African countries that significantly affected by sickle cell disease. Actually, I'm visiting the Uganda 3 weeks later. I got all the vaccination, so I'm so excited. So our team established a strong partnership with the local clinician in the largest sickle clinic center in National Mulago Hospital in Kampala. So we're gonna run some the pilot prototype testings in real world setting and to refine our usability. Not only do that, we're doing some work on the parent engagement, education, local capacity buildings. Okay, ultimately our goal is to protect lives and provide hope. Who wants to hold their hands? So all together, we can bring the innovative solution to the children with the sickle cell disease in sub-Saharan Africa. And then your support can help us to make these screening tools more accessible, and then we can improve countless lives. Thank you.
Our research brings hope. How beautiful is that? We're going to switch gears again. Many of you may not have liked math in school very much, and that's where Jason Heron comes in. Jason is from the Bagwell College of Education, School of Instructional Technology and Innovation, and will be talking about making math visible, rediscovering your curiosity.
Have you ever wondered why math can sometimes feel so confusing, yet so awe-inspiring? Think back to middle school math. At that time, everything was shapes and numbers, and then all of a sudden one day your teacher introduced you to algebra and it all became solve for x. And at some point, you were introduced to the Pythagorean theorem. Now, some teachers like to teach about Pythagorean theorem by telling stories. So I would tell how sailors used to wrap a rope around their forearm 3, 4, 5 times to make a perfect Pythagorean triple in order to make perfect right angles for their sail and also to make stable boats. I might reach for a bucket of blocks or Lego pieces, and we might do hands-on activities to see the 3 times 3 and 4 times 4 equals 5 times 5 that we see up here on the screen. This brings us to our central question of the presentation. How can we foster an appreciation for the wonder, the joy, and the beauty of mathematics? If we look around us in the world, math is everywhere. We see it in nebulas, we see it in tessellating tiles, we see it in nautilus shells. Take, for example, if you look outside here in Atlanta, Georgia, you can stare up at the trees and you can see the phenomenon known as crown shyness. If you look at this, this is a natural pattern that's kind of puzzle-like that emerges between the crown of the tree as they brush against each other. Well, the next time you get some honey, take a look at the honeycomb. The honeycomb also features a shape that we call a Voronoi pattern. We can find that in the pattern that is in the body of a giraffe. And tomorrow night, when you're doing your dishes, look down in the sink and you'll find it in your soap bubbles in 3 dimensions. We can also find it in very delicate structures, such as the wing of a dragonfly, and also up in that tree canopy in the cells of the leaves. We can take inspiration from these patterns when we're looking at designs, looking at art, and looking at architecture in the world. Take, for example, prosthetics. Prosthetics can use these Voronoi patterns to make shapes that are natural, strong, light, and durable. They also apply to furniture and architecture, where we can get these sleek, natural, aesthetic lines. But ultimately, math is not frequently taught this way. Math is often taught about in the textbooks as abstract number and symbol manipulation. So that begs the question, how can we make math more approachable so we don't tune people out early in life so they start hating math? So in my research, I work with advanced manufacturing technologies such as 3D printers, laser cutters, and computer-aided design to teach K through 12 teachers and students how to actually create their own math manipulatives. If we take a look up here, we got this little nautilus gear, that inspiration that we saw earlier on the slide. And also in a moment, we're going to see here a simple little tool that's for teaching Pythagorean theorem. So going back to the earlier example, Pythagorean theorem is often taught by teachers by putting down some letters and numbers and calculating it out a bunch of times. This tool can be made for about $2. It has a 3D printed top and bottom, and then a laser cut acrylic sheet that goes in the middle that shows the subdivision of each one of the blocks. We can fill it up with some tiny little beads. So in this case, I have some glass beads that are actually from the 1980s that were used for bedazzling. I found a deal on it on eBay. But you can tilt it over, and you can see that visual representation that a squared plus b squared does indeed equal c squared. Now, we can take this exact same concept and apply it to statistics. So this tool here is called a Galton board. I worked with a high school intern from Wheeler High School, and she went together and we put together this shape. And what it does is when you flip it over, about 3,000 ball bearings fall. It's like a really fast Plinko game, essentially. And it can show you standard deviation. You can tilt it a little bit to the left if you want a left skew. You can tilt it a little bit to the right. But once again, it's another great visual demonstration. But not everybody has access to these advanced technologies for printing these. So I can take that exact 3D model, I can throw it into like kind of a game engine, throw some physics on it, and now I can do a virtual simulation using all of the exact same tools. Now, if we think about other ways that this can be applied, you ever stop and think to yourself, hey, how did those N95 masks actually work? Well, we can talk about scale factor. Nanofibers are inside of those masks, and they're really, really, really tiny. Well, I can go ahead and make a model in simulation, and I can actually simulate what is going on inside that N95 mask. In this example, the fibers in the middle are about 17 nanometers. The red dots on the right are about 100 nanometers, and the one on the left is about 300 nanometers. We can see the red ones are kind of bouncing around because they're experiencing Brownian motion, but this shows how mechanical and electrostatic separation can take place within one of those masks. Or I could take my classroom, for example, and using like a VR headset, I could scan my classroom and we could find out about polygons, like all those triangles up there. We could calculate the volume of that classroom, or I could just be silly and shoot balls at my dog Tater Tot if I want to. But this leaves an opportunity to talk about things such as angles of reflection, and I can actually turn the gravity off on this, and it becomes a gas diffusion simulator for the science classroom. So, as we've seen in this brief presentation, there's a lot of different ways that we can approach how we teach mathematics in the classroom. Hands-on models and virtual simulations offer another avenue to make math more relatable for teachers and students. So this brings us back to the central question of this presentation. How do we make math how do we foster an appreciation for the wonder, the joy, and the beauty of mathematics in our everyday life? I believe that hands-on mathematics and seeing it in nature is one of the ways that we can make math more relatable for all teachers and all students. When I run workshops, I often ask my teachers to send me pictures about what they see after they've come to the workshop. The one on the left is that now familiar Verone pattern in a mint leaf that they found in the yard. But the one on the right was an Easter orchid. And if you look at it, it has one petal, then two, then three, then five. That's the Fibonacci sequence there in nature for us to discover once we understand the mathematics. So ultimately, if we want to foster an appreciation for mathematics, we need to engage in exploration, play, and discovery. Ultimately, to foster an appreciation for the wonder, beauty, and joy of mathematics, we need to look into nature and find its endless possibilities.
All right, wouldn't it have been great to learn math that way when we all went to school? So we're going to switch gears again, and when I listened to the next presenter previously, I texted my husband that I needed his 3D printer at home. So our next speaker is Jeffrey Collins from the College of Architecture and Construction Management, and his talk is about layer by layer, rethinking architecture through 3D printing.
So here's a question. How many of you live in a 3D printed home? It might sound futuristic, but it may also be closer than you think. With fabrication technologies evolving, this vision is becoming a reality and will shape the future of architecture. So why ditch the old way of building? The answer is traditional construction is too wasteful of both time and material. But 3D printing, building layer by layer, uses only what's needed. This precision can cut waste, speed up building time, and drive a sustainable future. But it's not just about efficiency. What I'm talking about is a whole new design process. With direct-to-fabrication, architects can move more smoothly between digital tools and physical models, enabling faster prototypes, incorporating material insights, and creating designs that are more responsive and adaptive. And of course, that I teach, 3D printing gives students this learning experience. They design digitally and then engage with their creations physically, diving deeper into spatial design, material behavior, and production constraints. And then they repeat. This iterative loop lets us challenge conventional ideas and uncover fresh architectural possibilities. Students see the combination of digital precision and hands-on experimentation allows us to create forms that traditional methods can't achieve. Often our designs start with a single component. The magic happens when we assemble these together into complex modular structures. This approach shows how even the smallest parts, thoughtfully combined, can lead to entirely new architectural forms and functions. So far, we've worked with models and small-scale prototypes, but our vision extends to full-scale construction. Transitioning from models to full-size components will help us understand how 3D printing can meet the functional and structural needs on a larger scale. One tool we're using for this is the clay extruder. By translating digital designs into clay forms, we connect with a sustainable and historically familiar material. After all, clay has been used in pottery for centuries. But could it go further in architecture? Could 3D printed clay components go beyond decorative pieces to become functional structural elements? These questions drive our experimentation and the types of forms we're trying to print. Our initial experiments started with just controlling the extrusion process, how things like clay consistency, pressure, speed, nozzle diameter all combine to have an effect on the form. Each test provided essential insights into what's achievable and where we need improvement. Of course, we learned from our failures too. Each collapsed structure, air bubble, wonky layer helped us refine our techniques, sharpening both our designs and our understanding of the clay printing process. Alongside these physical trials, we continued digitally strategizing how each part could connect into a larger structure. Again, this iterative approach revealed not clay's limitations, but its promising potential. Our experiments can expand beyond just exploring form to addressing architectural challenges like filtering light, air, and water. We will adapt our printed components to respond to these functions, weaving both utility and beauty into the designs. So I want to tell you a little bit about the extrusion process. It requires a meticulous setup. Getting the clay consistency just right, loading materials correctly, slicing the digital models into layers are all crucial for successful prints. After extrusion, each piece dries, gets any touch-ups we think are needed, and then is fired. Our clay printer is on the Marietta campus. We don't have a kiln. So we've partnered with the Department of Ceramics and the Kennesaw campus for firing. Transportation involves careful logistics to ensure each piece survives the trip. We've only had a few casualties. After the first firing, we glaze and fire again for durability and aesthetic quality, assuring each component meets standards for structural testing and installation. Once the pieces are complete, we finally get to the assembly stage, the true test of our design structural and visual impact. Now at full scale, rather than just models, it transforms theoretical ideas into tangible, functional forms. Looking ahead, we're focused on refining this process even further, enhancing connections, improving performance, and adapting processes for large-scale production. Again, our ultimate goal is to make 3D printing scalable and accessible for real-world applications. As we expand, we're also exploring materials beyond clay, such as waste products. These eco-friendly alternatives could bring even greater sustainability to construction and open even more doors to what 3D printing can offer. So, perhaps one day soon, many of us will live in a 3D printed home. As digital design, sustainable materials, and 3D printing intersect, the future of architecture is being reimagined layer by layer. Thank you.
3D printed homes, how cool is that? So our last presentation for the day gets us back to AI. You heard me already talk a little bit about it earlier. Andrea Knowlton from the College of the Arts, the Department of Dance, humanizes AI.
Whether it's a zip code, a dress code, or a bro code, code helps us classify information into meaningful contexts. But how do you code something that's both universal and highly individualized? I'm talking about dance, which is my area of study as an associate professor at Kennesaw State. So let's take part in a little movement exchange. I'll go like this, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, this movement exchange is rich in information. I can see endless variations in the level, the path, the speed, and I've shown you on a small scale just how complex a movement exchange can be. But I'm studying something decidedly more complex than just a wave. Over the past 3 years, my colleagues and I at Georgia Institute of Technology have been trying to decipher how two dancers improvise together. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. So why do we care about this at all? So from a dance perspective, understanding the decision-making process between a co-creative nonverbal exchange is highly fascinating. And from a research perspective, the chance to make the subconscious visible is exciting and alluring, to say the least. So we've been doing this, and we're doing this to transfer the information to an avatar. So the avatar, as you might know, is AI's future body. So we're giving it a body and we're letting it interact with students. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my research in the next few slides. So bodies don't exist in a vacuum, of course, and so in order to let our AI experience the world, we've given it a camera to act as eyes and see, and we've also given it an interface, as you see here. Allows the human being to interact with it and have a co-creative exchange. And this software is called Lumini. It's originally conceived of by my collaborator, Dr. McGarrico at Georgia Tech. And Lumini is a co-creative, artificially intelligent powered software that allows for a human-centered interaction between dancer and avatar. And I want to bookmark that moment, human-centered, because against all odds, AI has really humanized my research. And it's allowed me to dive deep into studying human beings and their co-creative relationships. This was a big surprise to me when I started studying AI for sure. And it has been challenging teaching dance to an entity that has no nervous system, no situational or cultural awareness, has been hard. And to be honest with you, the avatar was not very good to begin with. So the avatar, what it really needed was on-the-job training. So what we did was we embedded this into my curricular experience in a dance improvisation course at Kennesaw State. And over the course of the entire semester, the students were able to teach the avatar how to dance. This was super rewarding because the students enjoyed it and were really part of that research process, bridging my research and my teaching. And there were challenges, of course, such as the avatar's frontal orientation. In dance, we're used to moving 360, but in this case, you have to stay frontal. That's challenging. The dancers also really crave touch and weight share when they dance with one another, and this is something that an avatar can't offer yet. But it also had amazing improvements. We taught it over 10,000 movements in the course of the semester. We were also able to build individual profiles, so each dancer is feeding it individual information and learning more about their own nuances and habits through the way the avatar responds. And we were very intentional about the design of the avatar as well. We conducted user studies to find out what people wanted to interact with, and we even averaged the measurements of our own dance population to create an avatar that wasn't so hyper-gendered as the ones that are off the shelf. We really created a real-life avatar. We've disseminated this research in a number of venues, from human-computer interaction journals to conferences in dance and AI, but my most favorite dissemination was at our Marietta Dance Theater, which took place in May 2024. Now, this performance was one of the most technologically heavy instances of a performance that's probably taken place at that theater. We've got scrims and projection screens, live feed cameras, live music and dance, all in an educational setting. And let's take, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds to look at the next slide.
Welcome to Lumini. Improvisation. Intelligence. Interactivity. Artificial.
So this was one of the first instances of a dance avatar performing on stage through AI with other human dancers, and certainly one of the first in a curricular student experience. And we've been able to involve over 50 undergraduate dance majors in this research to date, which is so exciting for a number of reasons. One of which is that our dancers are now able to see themselves as coders, software designers, avatar testers, digital performers. It embodies our research in a way that is really applicable to the evolving future of AI. And it can be applied to many fields. It will change the art form of dance from training and creative purposes, but it also has implications in the worlds of physical therapy and collaboration across borders. Our interactions with embodied AI are just beginning. In the quest to inform AI about who we are as co-creative species, we just might find out new things about ourselves as human beings. So in closing, I'd like to perform one last movement exchange. I'll go like this, and we'll see what you do back.
Thank you, Andrea. How about another round of applause for all of our presenters today? So this concludes all of our presentations today. However, there is more. The next thing I would like for you to do is vote. You will see a QR code on our screen here in a minute that gets you to our voting right there. We will be voting for your favorite presentation, oral presentation, and your favorite demonstration that's out there. For the rest of the evening, I hope you enjoy speaking to our research avatar and viewing our demonstrations and network. Speak with our amazing researchers. Thank you very much for coming. The winner for our oral presentation is Andrea Knowlton. And the winner for the best demonstration out there is Bobbin Deng and Taeyong Choi. Thank you, everybody.